Okay, so I want to make it really clear what's expected in the production meeting checkpoints. All right, so what you want to do is, since these checkpoints only involve about a minute worth of footage, it's kind of like a work in progress, right? So not just your video is going to be submitted, but also a bit of a commentary. All right, so for the video, what you want to do is you want to make sure that you provide the URL and make sure that your YouTube link is unlisted. Don't make it private because that involves passwords and teachers will be locked out. If you make it unlisted, anybody with a link can access it. So if you give your link to the teacher is going to be able to access your video, but nobody else will see it on your channel at all. There'll be like no record of this, work in progress. It won't be listed on your YouTube channel. So it's sort of invisible to everybody except for those that have the URL. And since you're just giving the URL to your teacher, there shouldn't be an issue with accessing it. All right. So for the paperwork, what you want to do is you want to make sure that you provide the statement of filmmaker intent, because the statement of filmmaker intent really sets the guidelines and the boundaries for the examiner. All right. So if the statement of filmmaker intent is very clear and precise, it does two things. It makes it really clear of what you intend to do, what your role is, and what your influence is. Right? Just like the statement of filmmaker intent breakdown here, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So you want to make sure that each one of those is covered. Okay? And you don't have to think about, how to package this. Just your first sentence should be number 1. Your second sentence, number 2. Third sentence, number 3. Fourth sentence, number 4. If you address those specifically and clearly, you're already establishing that you won't get a 1. Because if you look at the rubric and stuff, one of the things, one of the defining properties of the 1 mark band is that the filmmaker intentions are not clear or they're not stated. All right, so if you are clear and you do state them, you're already starting to establish that you are going to pass the commentary. Now, it's not a guarantee, but it really sets you on the path to success. So you really want to make sure that your statement of filmmaker intent is precise, it is exact, and it addresses 1, 2, 3, and 4 on our little template guide there. Okay, if you want more information about that, look at your FPA Directions Handbook. That is a perfect piece of material that is going to help you be successful. All right, so you not just have the statement of filmmaker intent, but with these production meetings, we're only looking for a 1-page submission, but we want you to have the filmmaker intent there, but also have you cover inquiry, action, and reflection, because in the course guide and in the rubrics, an emphasis on inquiry, action, and reflection is central to the entire course, right? So since this is just a production meeting, and it's just covering this first minute or a minute of your film, we want you to talk about the inquiry, action, and reflection process just associated with PM1 or PM2 or PM3. Okay? And then after you go through each one of the production meeting checkpoints, you're going to have enough evidence and details and specifics to assemble the entire FPA submission for IB. So inquiry, it's the questions, to address are: how has your inquiry, which involves research, helped you formulate your filmmaker intentions related to your production role? provide an example to support your answer. All right, and list your sources in MLA format. Now, examples are not just written examples, but visual evidence, because it has to be balanced. If it's imbalanced, you're not going to score higher than a 2 on the Pages document. Okay, so it has to be balanced, visual and written. It needs to be specific. Okay, and so, with inquiry, that includes, like, if you're saying like a film is your influence, right, and this director, well, the film is going to be part of your sources, because if you're using, let's say, Wes Anderson's Moonrise Kingdom, and you're incorporating single point composition and symmetry in your compositional approaches for a cinematographer. Right? If that's the case, Moonrise Kingdom is going to be a resource. So you're probably going to have maybe an image from Moonrise Kingdom. You might have, you might use like the director commentary from Moonrise Kingdom. Well, that's a different source then, right? Because it's supplementary material. You might have a quote from Wes Anderson, or Wes Anderson cinematographer in that production. So, that's going to be a part of your sources, okay? And including, quotes, that are going to, again, help you prove that you inquired and sought out knowledge, but then also, going back to this number 3 in your statement of filmmaker intent, if you just mention this but you don't prove it, it really weakens your pages. All right. So if you do mention it and then you do prove it, it's strengthening your pages, and that's where we get into the upper mark bands of 3s and 4s. All right. Let's action. How's your filmmaker intentions in your role? Notice that it's always linking back to the statement of filmmaker intent. Inquiry, action, reflection is always going back to the statement of filmmaker intent. It's like this is your thesis. Okay? So every one of these things is going back. Anything that you write has to be connected back to the statement of filmmaker intent. So, action. How's your filmmaker intentions in your role determine planning production of the project? All right? So this is your pre-production process. This is what you did in week 38, week 39, when you did the pre-production and storyboarding stuff. That evidence now, all right, we didn't collect that, but that evidence helps you complete this work, okay? So take pictures of that, scan those things, help that visual evidence support what your written stuff is, all right, dealing with your action, your process. Remember, that process has to be associated with the role, right? Your filmmaker intentions, so you're showcasing that particular intent. And if it's related to the technique, let's say the single point composition and symmetry in my cinematography approaches, right? I might have an image of how that was executed in Moonrise Kingdom. Then I have a storyboard of using something similar in my production, and then I might have a shot diagram of where the camera is, where the objects are on location, right? And then maybe a screenshot of my actual film, right? So now I have inspiration, right? I have the image from the film, my production process, right? Storyboard, shot diagram, and then end result. Okay, if I do that, that's showing and proving that I not just inquired, but I actually planned out and executed my intentions, and that they're attached to the technique. All right, so that's where action is really showcasing this. So you want to provide a visual piece of evidence that shows your planning in relation to your production role and filmmaker intent. If you don't do that, you, again, limit yourself. It's unbalanced. So now you're in the 2s and the 1s area. Okay, if you do what I just suggested and have like a series photography, whether it's vertically or horizontally, like a comic strip, of idea inception to final execution. Now all of a sudden you're scoring in the 3s and the 4s. Finally, reflection. What aspects of your planning has helped you accomplish your filmmaker intent? Note, again, it's connected there. All right? So you're reflecting seriously and specifically about your process. So, was your planning good? Were there weaknesses in it? If so, identify that. What was one problem you encountered in accomplishing your intentions thus far, and how did you overcome it? So not just pointing out the problems, but showcase how you overcame it. How did you problem solve? If you problem solve something, if you recognize an issue and you come up with a plan to overcome it, that shows that you are learning and you're adjusting and you're growing. All right? And that's a key part of this entire process. It's a key part to all art, right? That we go into a project or with certain ideas, and sometimes that idea at the start doesn't completely end up that exact same way. So that journey that the artist takes and being able to articulate that process and show what you learned, how you grew, and how you have evolved is something really, really cool to showcase. And so allow that reflection section to do just that. All right? Your pre-production meeting document should always contain written and visual evidence for each of these sections. It really shouldn't be more than a 1 page in length. It must be 12-point sans serif font. I suggest to my students using Arial because Arial is one of the smaller sans serif fonts, right? But it has to be a 12-point font from the sans serif family. And then submit as a PDF or a DOCX. All right, so at the very top, again, provide your URL, right? You can just call it PM1 and then provide your URL. Then have your statement of filmmaker intent, right? No more than 4 sentences. Each sentence covers this, and then inquiry, action, reflection, written commentary, as well as visual evidence that supports the written. Okay, if you do that, you're going to be successful. All right, if you do these things and you take our advice, now your teacher has something to respond to and provide feedback to you. And so then, when that feedback comes, you can then use that feedback to improve each production meeting that comes, which then culminates in your final film portfolio assessment submission. Okay? Now, this information here will eventually allow you to compile that information so that your FPA pages document that you will end up sending to be, assessed, you're going to have enough material to, process and assemble so that you look really good with your entire process. All right. If you have questions or whatever, ask your teacher. Be proactive. Ask it earlier as opposed to last minute, so that you have enough time to make whatever adjustments you need to make in order to be successful. All right. Thanks for watching, and break a leg.